Hello and welcome back to working with raster data in ArcPy. In this section, we're going to look at how we access and use the raster analysis tools in ArcPy and also familiarize ourselves with what's called the raster object. Raster tools live in multiple toolboxes within ArcGIS. Which tools you have access to are dependent upon your ArcGIS licensing. With most levels of ArcGIS without extensions, you have access to a limited set of raster tools within the data management toolbox. Adding on extensions to your software licensing can give you access to more tools with extensions like Spatial Analyst, Image Analyst, and 3D Analyst for raster data. All of these three toolboxes have a lot of overlap in the raster tools they include, and for raster analysis, Spatial Analyst is the toolbox that is most often used, and that is the one we will use in this course. Here is just a quick look at these toolboxes in desktop. This is often a really great way for you as a user to know what tools exist and what are available to you at the licensing level of your organization. On the left here, we see the data management toolbox. It has a sub-toolbox called Raster. Within that sub-toolbox, most of the raster tools that you would have access to for typical processing are under the raster processing sub-toolbox. But remember, when you access these things with ArcPy, you don't need to worry yourself with what sub-toolbox they live in. All of the tools within a primary toolbox are listed with that particular toolbox in the name of the tool. You don't have to navigate through the sub-toolbox names. Here is just a snapshot of what the Spatial Analyst tools look like when you have the extension. These are all sub-toolboxes that have their own long list of tools available to them. So what I like to do and tell people is that this is a great way for you to just familiarize yourself with what tools you have available and what tools are available in different versions of the software. As the software changes, different tools roll out. Some tools get deprecated or become legacy, and also some tools just simply change names and some of their parameters change. So this is a great way to keep on top of those changes and to understand what tools you have available to you at each of your licensing levels. Like I mentioned before, the raster tools in the data management toolbox are available at any licensing level and don't require a separate extension. The tools in the Spatial Analyst toolbox, however, are only available if you or your organization have the Spatial Analyst extension included in your licensing package. This is typically managed at the organization level. With ArcPro, this is managed with what we call the named user login function of the software. If you have the software installed on your computer and you have access to the tools when you are running ArcPro while logged into your organization, then you will also have access to those tools when you use ArcPy. If you are in ArcMap, this is managed at the license level. So when you import ArcPy, if your ArcMap installation has access to these extensions, then your ArcPy session will as well. In both of these cases, in ArcPro and ArcMap, you do still need to check out the extension and import the entire Spatial Analyst module in order to work with the tools. First, you need to import the entire Spatial Analyst SA ArcPy module. The syntax here is simply a way to import everything. Get my pointer. Syntax here is just a way to import everything from that particular module. Using the method from and the module and import with the star also adds on a level of efficiency for your code. What it means is that you do not need to put the SA dot in front of all of the tools that live in the Spatial Analyst toolbox and in the Spatial Analyst extension. So it makes your code a little bit cleaner, and you can just use the tools by referencing the tool name. So really, in summary, what this does is it imports the entire Spatial Analyst module and also makes it so you do not need to put SA in front of all the Spatial Analyst tools. Next, you need to check out the extension. This is always a good way to first make sure you have the extension available to you to check out. At a university, we will typically have unlimited numbers of most extensions to check out. However, in the outside world, organizations typically buy seats of the extensions. So for example, at your organization, you may have 10 seats of ArcPro available to the entire organization, but maybe only 3 Spatial Analyst extension seats. Checking for those Spatial Analyst extensions prior to using them and prior to checking them out is an important part of the workflow then within your organization, because you want to make sure that the tools are available for you to use at the time you want to use them. Finally, using the sys.exit method here is just a nice way to end your script and the off chance that you do not have the extension available to work with at the particular time you're running your code. For all of the raster tools, they are going to function with ArcPy, and the syntax is going to be fundamentally different than the vector and feature data tools that you've seen. So remember, with most of the feature tools, part of the required parameters is that you explicitly have to name the saved output and where it needs to be saved within the parameters of that tool. It is part of the tool. For raster tools, this is not the case. The raster tools create what is called a RasterObject that gets returned by the tool. This object is a temporary in-memory version of the output from the tool. So say your result grid. For every tool that you want the output saved, you must also include an additional line of code to save the output into a permanent raster dataset. Here is an example of what that looks like. In this code snippet, we are using the extract by mask tool to extract out the area of the University of Idaho shapefile from the LATA-DEM grid dataset. So what I want you to notice is how the syntax here's the syntax for extract by mask. It does not include any output parameters. This is again because of all the raster tools are going to return a raster object. We need to capture that returned object into a variable if we want to use what gets returned from the operation. So here we are capturing that returned raster object into a variable called outExtract. Then our next step is to save that returned object into a permanent raster dataset. To do this, we use the save method for the object. And we're going to then indicate the path name and the name of the output dataset. So what we're doing now here is saving a new raster grid that's called UIDEM inside of this folder on our computer. The outExtract.save, it creates a permanent raster dataset with the name that you are going to indicate. So this raster dataset could be an Esri grid like you're seeing here. It could also be a raster that lives within a file geodatabase, or it could be a geotiff image with the .tiff extension. All right, this concludes our brief look at how to find the raster tools in ArcGIS and how to work with the raster object in ArcPy.